Chapter 7 Life with Little Rabbit. Yellow Cloud led the boy to his teepee. The woman who had called for his release trotted along behind. Dad was so weak that he could barely stumble along. The woman, he saw, was the wife of Yellow Cloud. Her name, he learned, was Little Rabbit. When they reached the lodge of the chief, he turned to Thad and said, "You obey this woman." To Little Rabbit, he said, "This boy, he is yours. You make him work." Though he did not understand all the words of the chief, Thad knew well what he meant. He had heard of the custom of giving a captive to a woman. That was Little Rabbit. To a boy of the Comanches, it was the supreme insult to be ordered about by a woman. To Thad, it meant nothing of the kind. He had carried out his mother's orders all his life. She had called him her right-hand man, and he had been proud of the title. Besides, he knew that he owed his life to Little Rabbit, and for that he would serve her gratefully. Another woman sat in the front of the adjoining lodge, working on an embroidery on a buckskin pouch while her baby swung peacefully in a hand-embroidered cradle. The cradle was a bag into which the little fellow was laced in a standing position. It hung by two decorated buckskin straps from a nearby oak tree. Little Rabbit was dressed in a fringed and beaded garment of doeskin, but the other, whose name was Blue Flower, wore a white woman's dress of calico. Little Rabbit gave Blue Flower an order in a crisp, commanding tone, and she obeyed at once. "Is Blue Flower your daughter?" Thad asked Yellow Cloud's other woman, was Little Rabbit's reply. So the chief had two wives. Thad had heard of the Indians' custom before. When he entered Little Rabbit's lodge, Thad was amazed at the neatness of its arrangement and the beauty of the furnishings. He had always thought that an Indian lodge would be a mere dirty shelter, but here was neatness and order. The lodge had a buckskin lining upon which had been painted the stories of various battles and hunting experiences. The colors were bright. About the insides were brightly painted objects of daily use, such as war drums, saddlebags, carrying cases, willow backrests, and robes and pillows for a couch. A fire burned in the middle of the hard-packed floor. Little Rabbit gently washed the boy's wounds, and that night, on an old buffalo robe thrown on the floor, he slept a sleep of total exhaustion. The next morning, with no consideration for Thad's weakened condition, Little Rabbit put him to work. Get wood was her first command. Thad had begun this period of servitude in the camp of the Comanches. Thad made up his mind that Little Rabbit should have no reason to complain of his work, and after a few weeks, life became easier. At first, Little Rabbit seemed to be trying him out, keeping him at work all day bringing water, fetching wood, and scraping hides. At least, after a few weeks, he was no longer kicked to his feet early morning by Yellow Cloud. Little Rabbit brought him a surprise gift one day. It was a suit of clothes. Besides the breechcloth, there was a pair of buckskin leggings and a tunic that came down almost to his knees. Now he would not only be warm, but his fair skin would be protected from the sun's rays. "These," said Little Rabbit, "are the garments of my son." "Have you a son?" Thad asked, surprised. He had seen no one in the village who seemed to be the son of Little Rabbit and Yellow Cloud. "My son is dead," Little Rabbit said. "Long Knives killed him." "How did it happen?" he asked. "In a battle last year. Our men had gone to take horses and white men found them. My son died." Thad remembered. It must have been the Austin Ranch the Indians had been raiding and burning, and the young buck was killed there. But he said nothing, for Little Rabbit believed that whatever the men of her tribe had done was the right thing. For her, the Long Knives were always in the wrong. As he worked, Thad looked about him at the women and girls to find one with clear blue eyes and soft, dark cloud of curly hair. But the girls he saw wore their straight black hair cut short at the neck. This was the custom of Comanche women. Every day when Thad went to find wood, Blue Flower accompanied him, while Little Rabbit watched the baby. He had hoped that while getting wood or water, he could circulate about a little and maybe find Melissa. After a few weeks, Blue Flower relaxed her watchfulness, and he was able to get away a little more each day. Yellow Cloud and Little Rabbit talked to him these days, too. He was becoming one of them. "You are no longer a boy of the Long Knives," Yellow Cloud said one day. "You will soon be a boy of the Comanches." Thad said nothing, for he was afraid to say what he was thinking. "You will see," said Yellow Cloud, "that the white men make war against the Comanches. We must fight back because it is our land. For many years we have hunted here." Thad knew the purpose behind such talk. Johnny Answorth had warned him that the Indians try to turn captives against their own people. Thad made up his mind that he would pretend to believe them, but he was determined that he would never be influenced by their words. He kept remembering little Celie, her mother, and Johnny Answorth's face. He was still sure he hated the Comanches. There came a day when he thought he had found Melissa. He saw a little Comanche girl wearing a white girl's dress, which he recognized. It was the blue and white stripe with little pink roses scattered over it. Either Melissa was somewhere in the camp, or she was no longer alive. He searched the faces of every girl he saw, but no one looked like Melissa Branson. Coming home from gathering wood one day, he passed a crowd of boys playing a game. It consisted of trying to ring a pole struck upright in the ground with a hoop made from a willow twig. He stopped to watch them. Scar Pony saw him and called out so that all could hear, "Long Knife boy is woman." Thad had an answer for that. "Scar Pony is woman, ride woman horse." He knew that no grown Comanche man would ride a mare. Mares were for women. "I will never ride woman horse after I am a man," Scar Pony argued. "Why do you steal her from me then whenever she runs away from you?" Thad demanded. "I do not steal what is already mine," Scar Pony retorted. I want her so I have other ponies like her someday. Then I will ride only her sons. Thad asked why the Indian boy had shot her full of arrows, but Scar Pony denied having done that. Scar Pony changed the subject. You white boy got spots on face. Thad ran his hand over his freckled, spattered cheeks and nose. Freckles, he said. Running Fox and I call you Spotted Boy, Scar Pony said. We think that is a good name. Thad grinned good-naturedly. I say as good as any, I reckon. He rather liked the name. Until now, Yellow Cloud and Little Rabbit had dubbed him Snow on Top because of his white hair. He liked Spotted Boy better. You steal my pony Blackbird, Scar Pony said after a little. I don't have to steal her, Thad said. She knows where she belongs, and she came home to me by herself. Maybe my father Red Wolf sell her to Comanche in New Mexico, Scar Pony said next. Why hasn't he sold her before? Thad asked. It was something he had wondered about, for he knew that many of the stolen horses were driven into Mexico or New Mexico. The animals were sold to the Mexicans along the Rio Grande, who were known as Comancheors because they traded with Comanches. I do not want to sell Blackbird, Scar Pony said. My father would not sell her if I do not want him to. So that was it. That had to yield a sort of ray gratitude to the Indian boy. Had not Scar Pony wanted Little Bit for raising future ponies, she would have been sold long ago to the Comancheors and Thad would have never seen her again. Several times after that, Scar Pony came to Yellow Cloud's lodge and asked permission for Thad to come and take part in the boys' games. Sometimes Little Rabbit shook her head and set Thad to a new task, but other times she permitted him to go. All one afternoon they practiced shooting arrows at a mark on a cottonwood tree. At first, Thad's arrows went so wide that the others laughed. It was hard to get the hang of it, although with rifle or pistol he was as quick and accurate as any man at home. After a while he began to sense the direction and strength of the wind, and gradually he improved until he was almost as skilled as the Comanche boys. Someday, Scar Pony confided, you will go with us on the hunt. Thad grasped at this promise with joy, for he had watched the Indian boys galloping over the hills and plains on their ponies, or returning from the hunt with their older brothers. He had envied them for their freedom, and wondered if Little Rabbit would ever let him go with them. Now that Running Fox, Scar Pony, and some of the other boys were friendly to him, Thad's life was not so hard. Almost daily Little Rabbit gave him time to play for an hour or two. The boys got into discussions of all sorts, and Thad took the opportunity one day to ask about something he had wondered. Why, he asked, do you Comanches raid and steal and kill the white people, when the government has given you a place in the Indian Territory north of the Red River? Don't they feed you and give you land to work? Scar Pony's older brother Whirlwind spat on the ground and replied with a sneer. Do the Long Knives own the world? The Comanches for generations have called this land their own. We have hunted where we would. Now the Long Knives would keep us on small lands far from our hunting grounds? We do not like that. We go where we want to. We like to hunt where we always hunted. Thad had to admit to himself, much as he hated to, that he would not like such arrangements either. Sometime later a band of Indians approached. They were greeted with a clamor of welcome, so Thad judged them to belong to Yellow Cloud's village. They were leading ponies loaded with buffalo meat and hides. Thad recognized them then. They were young men just returning from the hunt. Now he was made to do more squawks work, scraping hides and preparing them for curing. The fresh hides were stretched on the ground or standing frames and pegged taut with a stout wooden pegs. With Blue Flower, he spent days on his hands and knees scraping the hides with a hoe-shaped implement of horn or buffalo shoulder bone. All the bits of flesh and fat that clung to the hides were removed. It was a job Thad detested, and it left him sore and exhausted by nightfall. He also spent many hours cutting the meat into strips for drying. Although Thad had already accumulated a large heap of wood for the winter, he was still sent out for more. The need would be great when the weather grew colder. Little Rabbit had stacked the wood neatly just inside the door of the lodge. Hunting for more wood one evening, he had to go some distance from camp. There was little timber in the country, and the Comanches burned mostly the low-growing mesquite and buffalo chips. As Thad was stooping to pick up a piece of dead wood, a voice spoke to him from a bush nearby. Thad Conway, the voice said. Don't let them see we're talking. He looked about as a girl stepped from the bushes. At first glance, the girl looked like all the others. Straight, short, black hair and dark skin, though not quite as dark as the others. She was dressed only in an uneven tunic of buckskin. A pair of old moccasins were tied to her feet. He had seen this sorry-looking figure about the camp, but he had thought nothing of it. He had seen her for a Comanche child. He should have recognized that she was not dressed as warmly or as neatly as the other children. Looking again, he noted that her eyes were deep blue in color. These were no Indian eyes. It had to be Melissa Branson. His heart skipped several beats, and his voice sounded strange as he managed to say, Lizzie, I didn't know you. What happened to your hair? They cut it and rubbed bear grease into it to make it straight, so I'd look like all the others. She seemed to be groping for words, as though speaking in a language new to her. Thad hardly knew what to say. The meeting was so sudden. Don't let them see we're talking together, she repeated. They'll kill us. Buffalo Horn has warned me never to speak to you. Thad turned to break the stick he was about to add to his load. His thoughts were not working, but somehow, inside, he felt a lightness, as if the ground would not stand under his feet. He had found Melissa. How did you get here? She asked, stooping to pick up some buffalo chips to put into her basket. Did they burn your house and kill your folks? No, I was on the creek with Travis after cattle. I was picking up pecans and we got separated. I think Trav got away. Then a thought occurred to Thad. Did Melissa know Celie was dead? How did they happen to keep you alive, he asked. I reckon because my hair is dark, she answered, and I didn't cry. I was too scared to cry. They worked at their wood, gathering for a few moments without speaking. Thad believed that both of them had Celie in mind. Suddenly, Melissa burst out crying. Thad tried to comfort her in his awkward way, putting his arm around her while she cried on his shoulder. He felt a love for Lizzie Branson such as he had never known before. He longed to help her, but they were a forlorn pair of children with no help in sight. After a little, he said what he had on his mind ever since he had been taken by two lances and his friends on the creek. Melissa, we've got to run away, Thad said finally. But how, she asked. I don't know for sure, Thad replied. But now I've found you, I'll think of a way. A sound in the bushes told them Blue Flower and the other women and girls were coming. Melissa turned and hurried toward them. We won't ever speak in camp, Thad whispered as she was leaving. She made no answer except to shake her head. Thad hastily got his load of wood on his back and hurried in the opposite direction. After that, whenever he saw the forlorn little figure about the village, he gave no sign that he knew of her. But he watched morning and evening to see which way she went for wood and water. When she seemed to be alone, he tried to get close to her without attracting attention. He found only a few opportunities to speak with her in safety. All he could say then were the whispered words, I'm still trying to figure out a way for us to get home again. At night, Thad would try to think up plans for their escape. Generally, he was too tired and would fall into a deep sleep as soon as he rolled himself in the buffalo robe. But during the day, he was constantly thinking of escape. He realized that the first thing was that they must have a horse apiece. Little Bit he must have. He was almost as anxious to free the horse as he was to save Melissa. No doubt Little Bit, smooth customer though she was, would have escaped long ago if Thad had not been close by, thought the boy. One day, as he was in his way back to camp, stooping under a heavy load of wood, he was grumbling to himself about the way he was being treated, and this despite the fact that Yellow Cloud and Little Rabbit was treating him better every day. Hauling wood like a mule, he thought. Suddenly, he had an inspiration. Throwing the wood down beside the lodge, he said to Little Rabbit, I go far for this wood, farther each day. It is growing scarce near camp. Comanche women have horse to bring wood. I need horse. Bring more wood with horse. Little Rabbit's eyes crinkled maliciously. No horse, she said. Then striking Thad across the shoulder with a piece of stiff hide, she added, Spotted Boy, good horse. Thad tried to grin at her joke, but it didn't even sound slightly funny. His request paid off, however, for the next day, when he started out for wood, Little Rabbit said, Spotted Boy, get horse. He grabbed a rawhide hackamore and hurried to where the horse herd grazed, for some distance from the camp. Most of the horses were hobbled and could not stray far, but they were also under a guard of half-grown boys and one or two men. Little Bit came jumping toward him as fast as she could travel. She was impeded by her hobbles, but when she saw him coming, she gave a loving nicker and rubbed her nose against his shoulder. He petted her, smoothing her silken nose and rubbing her neck. She was a link with home. He loved her almost as much as he did the members of his family. He ran his hand over her muzzle and touched her soiled jaw tenderly. You'll help me haul wood, won't you, Little Bit? Thad was slipping the hackamore on her when Scar Pony came running toward him. Blackbird, my horse, he shouted. You will not take my horse. Never had Thad wanted so much to clout anyone over the head, and he swung the braided hackamore in his hand. He knew he must go along in good humor with anything the Comanches required of him, but he could not resist starting an argument with the Indian. The horse is not Blackbird, her name is Little Bit, and Comanche that means small thing. You steal her from me. Oh, she is my pony, Scar Pony said in a quarrelsome tone. My people lose her when she's too tired? You Long Knives find her. She is not yours. She is mine. She would have died. I keep her alive. Now you steal her from me. Scar Pony laughed. I steal many times, he boasted. Now I keep. Thad realized that this talk might defeat his purpose, so he changed his track. No good, this horse, he said. You keep. He looked about the other horses, thinking this would be a good opportunity to select one that would help him escape later. He decided that Lizzie should ride Little Bit, for she was gentle and had an easy gait. More important, she would head straight for home, so that, if they should become separated, Melissa would not get lost. Now Thad selected a dark brown horse with a sturdy bone and legs long enough to outdistance any of the others. As he rode him, Thad talked gently, stroked his mane, and patted his neck. Loading the wood on the animal's back, Thad was careful to fasten it so that it would not chafe the hide. Thad called the horse Bullet, and tried to make him feel that he belonged to him. He had inquired of the boys of the horse's guards if this belonged to any of the warriors in particular. It would only make the Indians' pursuit of Melissa, with him, more determined if he was riding anyone's favorite horse. When it came to Little Bit, he would have to simply take the chance. Perhaps it was Little Rabbit who had begun to think of Thad as her son, or maybe it was because Bullet helped him get through wood faster. Whatever the reason, she began to lighten up on the other tasks, and he had more time to play. One afternoon, as Thad was busy scraping a hide, Little Rabbit sat with some of the other women sewing the seams on the buffalo hide lodge cover. One of the women said to Little Rabbit, Your son has hair like the snow. The other women laughed and joked about the spots on her boy's face, as well as his cotton-like hair. When they had gone to their lodges, Little Rabbit set about changing things. She dyed Thad's hair with some sort of walnut juice extract and rubbed enough of it on his face to hide his freckles. Then she braided his hair into 2 braids, extending them with weavings of cloth and adorning them with red and green feathers. When he looked into the pool that evening, he saw the strange reflection of an Indian boy with light blue eyes. Who would recognize him as Thad Conway now? He was not sure whether he was pleased or displeased. Now Scarponi and Running Fox began treating him more as one of them. He came to be as skillful as any other with bow and arrow, and often brought home a rabbit or a few quails for Little Rabbit's pot. She seemed proud of his accomplishments. Even Yellow Cloud commended him for his marksmanship. Although Scarponi was more friendly toward the white boy, it made Thad boil inside to see a little bit under the Indian boy's rein. He did manage to show the Indian lad that it was cruel to use a jaw rein on her. When Thad first talked to him about it, he replied with a contemptuous twist of his mouth, "Pony him no hurt." "It does too hurt a pony. The same it would hurt you," Thad argued, but Scarponi jumped on her back and rode away as though unimpressed. However, from that time on, Thad noticed that she wore a bit and bridle. Scarponi was something of a dandy in the Comanche sort of way. He kept his hair neatly braided with bright feathers stuck in it. When he rode Little Bit, he stuck dyed hawk or eagle feathers in her mane. Thad had to admit that the two presented a jaunty appearance. The Comanche boys had many games, and Thad now found time to take part in them. They used corn cobs with 3 turkey feathers stuck in the small end, or used his dart to aim at targets. Pine cones were used for toss and catch. Certain games were designed to develop warrior skills. One of these featured a shield and rawhide-covered ball. One player held an old shield in his arm as he stood in the center of a large circle marked on the ground. With his shield, he tried to avoid being hit by the balls being thrown at him from outside the circle. The player who first struck his body with a ball took his place. The Comanche boys' heroes were the men most skillful in the hunt or the raid, who brought home the most buffalo or antelope. The boys worked hard at the games that increased these skills. Thad was happily surprised one day when Scarponi came running to meet him. "We go on a hunt for antelope tomorrow," Scarponi told him. "Little Rabbit says you can go with us." Thad had not built his hopes on Scarponi's promise, made him some time ago, to take him along on a hunt. Now he was full of excitement. Yellow Cloud took down from the loop on the wall a bow and placed in a finely worked hide case. From behind his backrest he brought a quiver full of arrows. "You take these, my son," he said. "These were used by our other son." Before dark settled down, Thad practiced firing at a target with his new bow and arrow. He hoped to be as successful as the other boys on the hunt. Perhaps they would consider taking him along on a buffalo hunt someday. To hunt a buffalo is something he had always wanted to do. Continue listening.